In ages long past, in a distant land, there lived a man. He was neither a man of great wealth nor one of poverty. He had 3 young sons. They were handsome and striking young men. They were literate, possessed of sharp minds and keen understanding. They sought the company of the virtuous and steered clear of those with ill intent. Nasir, the eldest, was 21. Nevruz, the middle son, was 18, and Nadir, the youngest, was 16. One day their father summoned them to his side. After showing them his affection, he spoke. "My dear sons, the inheritance I leave behind will not sustain you for long. I have done all that I could for you. Expect no more from me. I have bestowed upon you 3 vital traits. First, I have ensured you are healthy and strong. Second, I have trained you in the arts of weaponry, making you master warriors. Third, I have taught you to fear no man. Thus you have become men of courage. And now I shall give you 3 pieces of counsel. Listen closely and hold them forever in your hearts. Always be honest so that you may remain far from hardship. Never shy away from labor so that you may live in comfort and peace. And never succumb to pride or vanity so that you may never face shame before others. All else you must provide for yourselves. I have prepared 3 horses for you, 1 black, 1 brown, and 1 the color of the earth. I have filled your saddlebags with enough provisions to last a week. The time has come for your departure. Travel the world, wander far and wide, for without seeing and knowing the world, you can never truly become men. Go now and forge your own destiny. May your path be clear, my sons." With these words, their father rose and departed.
The 3 brothers began their preparations for the journey and set out at the first light of dawn the following day. They traveled throughout the day, venturing far from their home. As evening fell, they stopped to rest. They dismounted their horses, ate their meal, and began preparing for sleep. Their surroundings were desolate and eerie. The 3 brothers realized it would be unwise for all of them to sleep at once. They decided to divide the night into 3 watches, and so they did. First, Nasir, the eldest brother, took his watch, while the other 2 lay down to sleep. Nasir sat for a long time, occupied with his sword, all the while ensuring his brother's safety. It was a moonlit night. A profound silence had blanketed the land, and all of nature had fallen into a deep slumber. Suddenly, a sound echoed. Nasir gripped his sword tightly and rose to his feet, alert. Just beyond where the 3 brothers were camped lay a forest, where a lion rested in its den. Catching the scent of man, the lion emerged from its den and moved toward the clearing. When Nasir saw the lion, he felt neither fear nor panic. He was confident he could handle the beast. Yet he did not want his brother's sleep to be disturbed. He began to run in one direction, and the lion followed him. After putting some distance between them, Nasir turned around. He struck the lion's paw with his sword. The wounded lion lunged at him with a roar. Nasir stepped back and delivered another heavy blow to the lion's left paw. Gathering all its strength, the lion attacked the brave young man once more. But Nasir evaded it again, and this time with all his might, he brought his sword down upon the lion's head. The lion collapsed on the spot and died instantly.
Nasir cut a piece of the lion's hide, fastened it around his waist beneath his shirt, and returned to sit beside his brothers as if nothing had happened. After a time, Nasir's watch ended. He drifted into sleep, and Nevruz took over the guard. His watch passed peacefully, without incident. Then came the turn of the youngest brother, Nadir. Nothing unusual occurred during his watch either, and the night slipped away. At dawn, the 3 brothers mounted their horses and resumed their journey. They traveled throughout the day, covering a great distance. As the sun set, they reached the foot of a massive mountain. At the base of the mountain stood a gargantuan tree, and directly beneath it a spring. The brothers decided to spend the night by that spring. Near the spring was a cave, the lair of the Dragon Sultan, the sovereign of serpents. However, the 3 brothers were completely unaware of this. They watered their horses, tethered them to the tree, and groomed them. After providing their fodder, they sat down to eat. When they finished their meal, they decided to take turns keeping watch, just as they had the previous night. As before, the two younger brothers lay down to sleep, and the eldest began his watch. Nothing of note occurred during his time. Then the watch passed to the middle brother, Nevruz. It was a moonlit night, and a deep silence had settled over everything. Yet, before long, the colossal dragon serpent emerged from the cave. With its massive head raised high, it approached the spring, hissing. But Nevruz felt not the slightest fear. Concerned that his brother's sleep might be interrupted, he began to run toward an open area. Catching the scent of man, the giant serpent pursued him.
Having distanced himself, Nevruz halted, drew his blade, and delivered a crushing blow to the serpent's tail. Reeling from the strike, the serpent began to writhe in agony upon the earth. The courageous youth landed a second strike upon its back, and with the third, the creature perished on the spot. Nevruz carved a long strip from the serpent's hide, fastened it around his waist beneath his tunic, and returned to his post, resuming his watch as though nothing had transpired. Before long, his watch concluded, and the duty passed to Nadir. Nadir's vigil likewise passed in safety, undisturbed by any incident. At the first light of dawn, the three brothers mounted their steeds and pressed onward throughout the day. They journeyed without respite, traversing mountain ranges until they reached a prominent summit. The sky was shrouded with clouds, and the night grew profoundly dark. Thus they resolved to camp there and halted their progress. They kindled a fire and sat to share their meal. As was their custom, the two younger brothers retired to rest, while the eldest remained on guard. Next, the duty fell to the middle brother. Once his watch was complete, he too slept, and Nadir, the youngest, took up the vigil. Nadir sat for a long duration, scanning the surroundings. The darkness was absolute, rendering everything invisible. Consequently, he sat with eyes closed, his senses heightened, listening intently to the silence. Periodically, he would open his eyes to survey the area, before closing them once more to resume his wait. Upon opening his eyes at one moment, he realized their fire had been extinguished. He resolved that the fire must be rekindled. With this intent, he ascended to a higher vantage point on the hill, scanning the horizon in the hope of spotting a distant flame. Suddenly, he caught sight of a faint, flickering light shimmering in the distance. Descending the hill, he mounted his horse and began to ride toward that distant glow.
After journeying for a significant duration, he came upon a solitary house standing in a desolate wilderness. Dismounting his horse, he approached the building stealthily, treading lightly on his toes. He peered through the window to catch a glimpse of the interior. The room was brightly lit. A meal was simmering over a hearth in the center, surrounded by approximately 20 men. Their countenances were grim, their gazes fierce and wild. It was evident they had gathered to hatch a perilous scheme. They bore the unmistakable appearance of thieves or brigands. Nadir thought to himself that simply walking away would be unworthy of a man of virtue. He decided to employ his wits, intending to infiltrate their ranks, discern their motives, and gain their confidence, only to deliver them to justice when the opportunity arose. Pushing the door open, he stepped inside with feigned boldness. Startled by the sudden appearance of a stranger, the bandits instinctively reached for their weapons. Addressing the leader directly, Nadir presented himself as a humble servant from a distant city. He explained that he had survived by performing minor tasks, but had always dreamed of joining a formidable band. Having sought them out as his only refuge, he pleaded for their acceptance. He urged the leader not to be deceived by his age, as he possessed many skills, including digging tunnels, scouting, tracking, and gathering clandestine intelligence. He promised to be of great use to their cause. Nadir played his part with such conviction that the leader was persuaded, telling him he had done well to come and inviting him to sit. Nadir stepped forward, offered a respectful bow, and joined them. Once the meal was prepared, they dined together. That very night, the bandits had set their sights on plundering the Sultan's palace. Following the meal, they mounted their horses and departed, with Nadir riding along them.
Shortly thereafter, they arrived at the gardens of the Sultan's palace. They began to deliberate on how to infiltrate the premises. Ultimately, they decided that Nadir would scale the wall first to ascertain whether the guards were asleep. Should the sentries be slumbering, the other bandits would descend into the garden one by one, and together they would breach the palace. With the assistance of the bandits, Nadir leaped over the wall. As he scouted the grounds, he observed that all the sentries were in a profound sleep. In the very center of the garden stood a horse-drawn carriage with two massive wheels. Nadir pulled it to the base of the wall and signaled to the bandits that the coast was clear. One by one, the bandits began to scale the wall. The moment the first bandit climbed the wall and peered down, Nadir delivered a swift, forceful blow to his neck with his sword. The severed head fell into the garden, followed by the body, which he dragged inside. The rest of the bandits met the same fate. Having dispatched all the bandits, Nadir proceeded cautiously toward the palace. He arrived before a grand hall. There stood 3 colossal doors, guarded by several concubines. Yet they too were fast asleep. Nadir entered through one of the doors. Inside he found a magnificently decorated chamber. Precious drapes hung from the walls, and in an opulent bed at the center of the room lay a young girl of ethereal beauty. Such was her beauty that Nadir approached her softly, removed the golden ring from her finger, and slipped it into his pocket. He then quietly exited the room and moved to the second hall. Deciding to inspect the second chamber as well, he stepped inside. This room was even more exquisite and grand than the first. Priceless tapestries hung from every corner.
In the center of the room, another beautiful girl lay sleeping on a silver bed, while at her bedside, concubines were slumped in deep slumber. Nadir approached silently, removed the ring from her finger, and returned to the hall. He then proceeded to the third chamber. This room was far more enchanting and magnificent than the first 2. Within it, an exceptionally elegant young girl was asleep upon a bed. She was even more beautiful than the others. Nadir drew near quietly, removed the earring from her left ear, and then exited the room into the garden. Scaling the garden wall, he left the palace, mounted his horse, and set off toward his brothers. When he arrived, both of his elder brothers were still fast asleep. Nadir sat down and began to occupy himself with his sword. At daybreak, the 3 brothers sat for breakfast. After their meal, they mounted their horses and resumed their journey. After traveling some distance, they reached a great city. Upon entering the city, they settled into an inn. Having tethered their horses under a shed, the 3 of them went to the tea house to rest and drink tea. At that moment, a town crier appeared on the street and began to proclaim loudly, "Hearken, O people, and listen well. A strange event occurred last night in the Sultan's palace. In the palace garden, an unidentified individual beheaded 20 bandits, and a precious golden item was taken from each of the princesses. Therefore, our Sultan has decreed that all residents of the city, regardless of status, shall assist him in solving this mystery. Our Sultan wishes to know the identity of the hero who displayed such great valor. Consequently, any stranger or traveler in the city must be sent to the palace immediately." Upon hearing this, the innkeeper told the 3 brothers to go to the palace without delay. The 3 brothers rose and made their way towards the Sultan's palace. Upon being informed of the arrival of these 3 strangers, the Sultan ordered them to be hosted in separate chambers and commanded his vizier to uncover the secret they held. The vizier advised that direct questioning would likely yield no results. Instead, he suggested leaving them alone to eavesdrop on their private conversations. His counsel was followed. A lavish feast was prepared for the brothers, featuring an array of delicacies. Meanwhile, in the adjacent room, the Sultan and his vizier listened with bated breath. After tasting the food, Nasir remarked that they had been served tender lamb, yet it was evident the animal had been suckled by a female dog. Nevruz agreed, noting that sultans are often unaware of even the nature of the meat they provide. However, he expressed his own bewilderment at how the grape jam could carry the scent of a human. Nadir then tasted the jam and concurred, stating that as all sultans are prone to bloodshed, it was not surprising if human blood had been mixed into the preserve. Nasir spoke once more, observing that only a master baker could have arranged the loaves on the tray with such precision. They understood they had been brought to the palace to reveal the mystery of the previous night's events, and expected to be interrogated. Nevruz insisted there was no need for lies, and that they should tell the truth. He proposed they first recount to one another the events of their 3-day journey. Thus, each brother began to tell his story. Nasir was the first to speak, describing his encounter with a lion and how he had fought and killed the beast.
As proof, he drew the piece of hide he had cut from the lion and placed it before his brothers. Then Nevruz recounted his own tale, producing the piece of serpent skin he had bound to his waist and laying it before them. It was Nadir's turn. He related everything that had transpired in the palace on the 3rd night and showed them all the precious items he had taken upon his departure. Before the Sultan and the vizier, all secrets were laid bare. Yet they could not fathom what the three brothers had said regarding the meat and the jam. Consequently, the Sultan's first act was to summon the shepherd of the flock and demand, "Tell me the truth. Was the lamb whose meat you sent to the palace yesterday suckled by a dog?" Trembling, the shepherd replied, "O great sovereign, if you spare my life, I shall tell you the whole truth." The Sultan said, "Your life is spared. Now speak the truth." The shepherd began his account. "Last winter my goat gave birth, but the mother died in the heart of the season. I took pity on the kid and placed it with a dog that had just whelped. That dog nursed and raised it with her own milk. When meat was requested from the palace yesterday, it was the only one I had left, so I slaughtered it and sent it to you, for your servants had already taken the rest of the flock." Next, the Sultan summoned the gardener and asked in a stern voice, "Tell me the truth. Was human blood mixed into that grape jam?" Fearfully, the gardener said, "My sovereign, an incident occurred. If you do not harm me, I shall tell you what happened." The Sultan replied, "I have pardoned you as well. Speak, what happened?" The gardener began, "Last year I had set aside some special grapevines for you. However, an unidentified person would come at night and steal these grapes. One night I hid beneath the vine and began to wait for the thief. Shortly thereafter I saw a man approaching. I struck him on the head with all my strength, using the staff in my hand, and he collapsed lifeless on the spot. Fearing discovery, I immediately dug a pit and buried the body right there, beneath that grapevine. The following year, those vines sprouted and bore fruit so abundantly it was beyond belief. There were more clusters than leaves. Yet there was a strange peculiarity in their taste. Therefore, instead of sending the grapes to you directly, I had them made into preserves. Thus, the veracity of the words spoken by the two brothers was fully proven. As for the third matter, the arrangement of the loaves on the trays, that too was correct, for the Sultan himself had arranged the bread, and it was revealed that his brother had once been a baker. The Sultan entered the three brothers' chamber, and after greeting them, spoke, "Everything you said has proven true. Through your intellect and integrity, you have gained even greater favor in my eyes. My esteemed guests, I have a request of you." The three brothers replied, "Please speak. If it is a reasonable request, we shall certainly fulfill it." The Sultan said, "I have 3 daughters, but no male heir. Stay here with me. Let me marry my daughters to you. I shall host a feast for the entire city and distribute pilav to everyone for 40 days and 40 nights. Nasir replied, "Your offer is most kind. Yet how can we accept? We are neither the children of a sultan, nor were our ancestors wealthy. You earned your fortune through your kingdom, whereas we learned to work by the sweat of our brows." The Sultan began to plead with them, saying, "Yes, I am a sultan, it is true. However, that your father raised you through honest labor and reared such courageous sons is his greatest source of pride. Is your father, then, any less than I?"
In truth, he is a man far richer in spirit than I. The reality is that many great kings have bowed before the beauty of my daughters, pleading and making countless offers. However, it is my heartfelt desire that you marry my daughters," he said. Ultimately, the 3 brothers accepted this sincere proposal. With great splendor, the Sultan wed his 3 daughters to the 3 brothers. Following this, the Sultan hosted grand feasts for 40 days and 40 nights, and the entire city feasted to their heart's content. The 3 brothers began their lives within the palace. The Sultan held his sons-in-law in high regard, but he felt the deepest affection for the youngest brother, Nadir. One day, while the Sultan was sleeping peacefully by a stream in his garden, Nadir sat watching over him. Suddenly, a venomous snake emerged from the stream. Just as it was about to strike the Sultan, Nadir caught sight of it. He instantly drew his sword and cut the snake in 2. As he was sheathing his sword, the Sultan suddenly opened his eyes. Seeing Nadir with a sword in hand, a profound suspicion took root in the Sultan's heart. He thought to himself that, since marrying his daughter, the young man's arrogance had grown. Blinded by ambition, he sought to kill the Sultan and take his throne. The Sultan rose and immediately went to his vizier to recount what had transpired. The vizier, who had been harboring jealousy and resentment toward the 3 brothers for days, seized this opportunity. He disparaged the brothers in the Sultan's eyes, claiming that the Sultan had married his daughters to these 3 vagrants without even consulting him.
He asserted that the son-in-law had intended to kill the Sultan with his own hands and that this deceitful man would surely bring about his end. The Sultan believed the vizier's provocative words.
Upon this, the Sultan ordered that Nadir be cast into the dungeon immediately. Nadir was imprisoned. The wife of Nadir was devastated by this turn of events, her spirit broken by incessant weeping. One day, she appeared before her father, pleading and imploring for the release of her husband. The Sultan commanded that Nadir be released from the dungeon and brought into his presence. When Nadir stood before him, the Sultan turned to him and spoke. He told Nadir that he never imagined he could be so ungrateful and deceitful, questioning how he dared to attempt to take the life of the Sultan. In response, Nadir recounted the tale of a parrot to the Sultan. The story was thus. Once there lived a sultan who possessed a parrot of exquisite beauty. The Sultan cherished the bird so deeply that he could not endure a single moment without its company. The parrot would converse sweetly with the Sultan, serving as his constant source of joy. One day, the parrot spoke to the Sultan, explaining that it had left its family, siblings and parents behind in India to come there. It missed them so dearly that it longed to see them once more. It requested that the Sultan grant a 20-day leave, 6 days for the journey there, 6 for the return, and 8 days to satisfy its longing for its kin. The Sultan replied that he could not permit the bird to go, fearing that once it departed, it would never return, leaving him to be consumed by sorrow. The parrot insisted, swearing that it would return. Eventually, the Sultan was persuaded, yet he conceded that he would grant only 2 weeks. The parrot expressed its gratitude, promising to return within 2 weeks by any means. Hearing this, the Sultan opened the cage door. The parrot emerged and flew toward the south until it vanished from sight. The Sultan was left staring after it, certain that the bird would never return. After a flight of 6 days, the parrot reached India and eventually found its parents.
The poor bird was nearly delirious with joy. He flew about jubilantly, singing a myriad of songs and engaging in tender conversations with his family and kin. He hardly noticed the passing of those 2 days, until finally the time to return to captivity arrived. His journey home had taken 6 days, followed by 2 days of reuniting with his loved ones. Now another 6-day journey lay ahead, which would mark the exact end of the 2-week leave granted by the Sultan. Yet the poor parrot could not bear to part from his family and siblings. Those days of joy had vanished in the blink of an eye, replaced by the looming shadow of somber and painful days ahead. His relatives, siblings, and parents gathered around him, pleading with him not to return. But the parrot replied, "No, I have given my word. How can I go back on my promise?" A wise parrot among them spoke up. "What promise do you speak of? Have you ever known a sultan to keep his word? If your beloved sultan were truly so merciful and generous, he would not have granted you a mere 2-week leave after 14 years of imprisonment in a cage. Were you born into this world only to remain a prisoner in a cage? Do not sacrifice your freedom just to entertain others. To draw too close to sultans and lions is both a great folly and a grave danger," he warned. Nevertheless, the parrot listened to no one and prepared for his departure. It was then that his mother said, "Since you are so determined, at least heed my words. There is a special fruit that grows in these lands, the fruit of immortality. Whoever eats it, no matter how old, shall find their youth restored. Take this fruit to your sultan and ask for your freedom in return."
Perhaps a sense of justice might stir within the Sultan, and moved by your devotion, he may grant you eternal freedom. The other parrots echoed this sentiment, gathering 3 small pieces of the fruit of immortality. Taking the fruits, the parrot bid his farewells and vanished into the northern horizon. After a journey of 6 days, he reached his destination. He spoke to the Sultan of the extraordinary properties of the fruits he had brought. Upon hearing this, the Sultan was overjoyed. He offered 1 fruit to his wife and placed the remaining 2 in a bowl, intending to consume them later. Meanwhile, the vizier, who had been observing everything, was consumed by jealousy and ambition. Approaching the Sultan, the vizier cautioned him not to consume the fruits immediately, but to have them tested first, suggesting they might be poisoned and intended to take his life. The Sultan found the vizier's warning to be prudent. Seizing the opportunity during a moment of the Sultan's inattention, the vizier surreptitiously poured poison over the fruits. 2 peacocks were then brought to the palace to serve as test subjects. The fruits were fed to the peacocks. No sooner had they swallowed than they collapsed and perished on the spot. The vizier asked the sultan if he saw what had happened, questioning what his fate would have been had he consumed the fruits himself. Overcome with grief and disappointment, the sultan remarked that he would have perished just as they did. In a fit of rage, the sultan pulled the parrot from its cage and without a second thought wrung its neck, killing it instantly. Such was the reward for the poor, faithful parrot's loyalty. A few days passed after the incident. One day the sultan grew furious with an old man and sought to punish him. He ordered that the last of the fruits of immortality, which he believed to be poisoned, be forcibly fed to the old man. As soon as the fruit was consumed by the old man, the transformation began.
In the blink of an eye, the old man's thinning hair regrew dark and full, new teeth appeared in his mouth, and the spark of youth returned to his eyes. Before the eyes of all present, the 70-year-old man was transformed into a strapping youth in his 20s. It was at that moment the sultan realized with bitter clarity that he had taken the parrot's life in vain and unjustly. After finishing the tale, Nadir turned back to the sultan and said, "Now let me tell you what truly transpired in the garden that day." Nadir went to the palace garden, retrieved the pieces of the snake he had cleaved in two with his sword, and brought them before the sultan. Upon seeing the remains of the snake, the sultan felt a profound sense of shame for his mistake and apologized to Nadir repeatedly. Nadir replied, "My sovereign, please grant us 3 brothers leave. It is time for us to return to our own land. It appears," he continued, "that living alongside sultans in goodness, peace, and trust is not truly possible." The sultan pleaded and implored them, but he could not sway the 3 brothers. "As 3 brothers, we cannot live in this palace as sycophants. We shall live only by the sweat of our brows and our own labor," they declared. To this the sultan countered, "But my daughters shall not go with you. They will remain in their own palace by my side." Hearing this, the 3 princesses cried out in unison, "No, we shall never be parted from our husbands." Stunned by their resolve, the sultan stood frozen in shock and was forced, albeit reluctantly, to allow his daughters to depart with their husbands. Taking their wives with them, the 3 brothers returned to their own land and their own homes, where they lived in peace and happiness until the end of their days, sustained solely by their own hard work and honest labor. Dear friends, I hope you enjoyed today's video.
If you enjoyed this production, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.
Evet, videomuz bitmiştir. Sonuna kadar izlediğiniz için teşekkür ediyorum. Bu videoyu beğendiyseniz kanalımızdaki diğer videolara da göz atabilirsiniz. Bu tarz videolar kanalımızda mevcuttur. Bize destek olmak için lütfen yorum yapmayı unutmayın. Videoyu beğenebilir, paylaşabilirsiniz. Biraz daha durumunuz varsa katılabilir. Süper teşekkür yollayarak bize destek olabilirsiniz. Kanalımız sizlerin sayesinde, sizlerin destekleriyle büyüyor. Lütfen desteklerinizi esirgemeyin. Bir dahaki videoda görüşmek üzere. Kendinize iyi bakın. Allah'a emanet olun.